Hi, everyone. Hello to all the viewers at home and wherever you may be. My name is Leila, and I am from the Hillingdon Library Service. And today I am joined by my lovely guest, the author of this amazing book that I've had the privilege of reading the last few days. And her name is Aliya Ali-Afzal. This is her debut novel, and yeah, we're going to have a really wonderful discussion about her book, her writing process, and everything in between. So, if you don't mind, Alia, would you like to go ahead and introduce yourself? Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yes, I'm so happy to be here. Thank you so much. So, my debut novel is called, like you said, Would I Lie to You? And it is commercial women's fiction. And it's the story about a woman called Faiza who lives in London. She's married, very happily married to a man called Tom. And she has 3 children. She lives in a very nice part of London. She has a lovely life. And everything seems wonderful, and it is wonderful. But she has one big secret. And the secret is that she has been dipping into her family's savings, always thinking she'll put it back one day when her youngest is a bit older and she goes back to work. And then Tom suddenly loses his job, and this is all the money they have to live on. And she has to put things right before he discovers what she's done, and before her actions have this awful impact on her children and everything in her life, really.
Yeah, it's a pretty remarkable novel because it starts out like a very rom-commy kind of way, very, very, very lighthearted. And as I read along, I realized that this book was actually addressing much more serious themes. So it's not a book that you read and then put away and forget about it in 24 hours. And I was wondering, like you said, the main character, the protagonist is Faiza, and she's married to Tom, and she spun this whole web of lies. That's the title. I was wondering, who inspired the character of Faiza, and maybe Faiza's family as well, if you'd like to discuss that.
So it actually started with a theme. And I worked as a career coach for 20 years. And I worked with a lot of people who may have lost their jobs and they had, serious money worries naturally in that situation. And they would tell me about it because we had confidential one-to-one sessions. But they told me they wouldn't tell their partners, their husbands or their wives, they wouldn't tell their parents, they wouldn't tell their friends. And I started to get the sense of how we carry this, heavy secret, these money worries. And also alone, really, and how overwhelming that can be and how alone you can feel. And also there is a sense, isn't there, these days, even though we will talk about anything, we shy away from talking about money.
Yeah, absolutely.
So it started with that theme, and money, this ostensibly it's about this savings fund, but money is never about money, right?
Yeah.
It's kind of how it makes you feel, and security, the stress you have when you don't have enough and you can't look after your children, feeling ashamed if you have too little, and sometimes even feeling ashamed if you have too much, if you come from
absolutely.
background. So that's how it started. And then, I was really, I'm a British Asian woman. I really wanted the protagonist to be a British Asian woman, as Faiza is, but I wasn't really seeing those kind of women, British Asian characters in the fiction that I was reading or on TV or anywhere. So Faiza is really drawn from the kind of British Asian women, I see amongst my family, I see amongst my friends. So, somebody funny, somebody who's in an interracial marriage, but her parents are okay with it after their initial kind of misgivings. Somebody quite kind of trailblazing, somebody quite ballsy. So that kind of how Faiza came to be.
Yeah, and it's interesting because I really appreciate your take on that, because a lot of times in popular media or the books are starting to change more and more now, but they always they tend to portray women from the East as this one-dimensional character. It's always the same story. She's subjugated. She doesn't have her own say. She's very, very stereotypical, very, very narrow, very, very cliched. And Faiza definitely breaks that norm. Of course, people who come from that kind of community know that, Asian women are a lot more multifaceted and, come in varying degrees and varying flavors, So,
Like everyone
um,
else.
yeah, I really appreciate that about this book that, you told uh, a newer, a fresher story of the Asian woman living in London, the British Asian experience. So yeah, that was very, very refreshing.
Thank you.
Now, I'm going to ask you a question that I asked last time when I had an author on, and the question is, did you end up writing the novel that you started writing, or did it just become something different by the time you were finished with it?
So I had a really clear idea about what I wanted actually, right from the start.
Mm-hmm.
And I was trying to do, my story didn't fit a mold. So I'm
Mm-hmm.
writing commercial women's fiction, but the woman is not a perfect person. She's a flawed character. And yet there are many lovable qualities about her. So a lot of the time in commercial women's fiction, you're expected to have this perfect, paragon of womanhood. And
Mm-hmm.
she's been, somebody's done wrong by her. But so I had to, I mean, she's a lovely woman, but she's done this terrible thing. So I
Yeah.
always knew it would start from this lie, and lies always snowball. And the interesting thing is, Lella, that the first line of the book and the last line of the book never changed.
Oh,
Yeah,
that's
I
very
always
interesting.
the first line, and it surprises me as well. A lot changed in the middle, so I kind of knew, the facts that I knew was that she's told a lie, she's made a mistake, she's done something bad, but she's a good person.
Are you
And what,
talking about the first line from chapter 1?
yes,
Oh, can
that's
I
it.
read it?
Yeah, please do. Yeah.
Okay. So it starts, chapter 1, 5 months earlier, April. The last thing you need to hear when you're waiting to get Botox at a Harley Street clinic is that your husband may be about to lose his job. That caught me right away. Botox, husband losing job, Harley clinic.
That was the
um,
first line, and it never changed.
that's
Never changed. So I didn't know how we would get there. So that did change. So for example, at the beginning, it was just Tom and Faiza had their story. But then, the family, the friends, the community, that all sort of developed around them. And their, other subplots, because obviously they don't exist in a vacuum,
yeah,
and those things grew organically. But yeah, I kind of knew what I wanted to write. I didn't know
yeah,
how I would write it, but I knew what it would be.
yeah. Um, I went and had a look at your bio, of course, and I realized that I noticed that you have a degree in Russian studies,
Yes.
and Faiza also has a degree in Russian studies. And besides the cultural identity of Faiza, how, if you don't mind me asking, how much was Faiza inspired by your own life experiences? Like for me, something that really came up for me was the generational burden of the stories that we talk about money. And I relate personally to that. And so I was wondering, what was your experience with that?
I think, you obviously take a lot of inspiration from your experience. So my experience, for example, working in the city as a
Hmm.
woman, going back to work as a mother, I used a lot of that.
Hmm.
In terms of the generational stuff, I think I used, it's such a common thing
Hmm.
that actually there are so many people that I can see in my circle, in my life, who are experiencing that. So that was really not hard to write authentically.
Excuse me. Hmm.
That's you. So,
Yeah.
so that was kind of drawing from my general kind of, experience. So those
Yeah.
things. The Russian thing, you know why I put it in? Because I did a degree in Russian and German. And the reason I put it in was that somebody said to me early on, because Faiza used to work, she used to work in finance. She used to have a very high flying job.
Yeah. Yeah.
And somebody actually said to me, would she really have had something like that? And again, there was the kind of bias against this British Asian woman that I'm writing, who did have a very high flying job, who did. And so the Russian, really, when somebody was questioning me, I thought, this is something, no one can challenge me. I did this.
Yeah.
No one can challenge me on this, on the Russian thing. So that was really early on, because I started writing this at a time where there weren't a lot of fiction. You know, now more fiction is coming out with more diverse sort of characters within our diverse list. So that was that. But the main thing that I've drawn from my own experience really is that my husband and I have really opposite approaches to money.
Yeah.
And so from my personal experience, so I'm a real spender and he's a real saver. And we've been married a very long time and that has never changed.
Yeah. So he's a spreadsheets person.
No, he's not that bad. He's not, no, thank God. We would not have been married a really long time. No. But we've had this opposite. And then a lot of couples have this. And, you know, when I was researching the book, I found that 1 in 4 of us keep some kind of money secrets from our partners. And I realized it wasn't just us, it was a lot of people. And also, research shows that money worries is one of the biggest causes of divorce as well.
Yeah.
So thankfully, although my situation is not that dramatic, I could see how that, I started to think about what about if somebody had these very different approaches, and then they were put in a really big crisis situation. Because these things are fine sometimes, you know, you can joke about it. He and I would like joke about it and make little comments. But when you put it under pressure, these differences can really kind of snowball.
What do you think the cause is for something as major, you know, as central as money within our families, within our marriages? Why do you think people are hesitant to talk about it?
I think, again, it's like I said to you that, you know, the money talk is never about money. So it's not just about a bunch of numbers. Otherwise, it would be really easy. You know, when somebody questions you about your spending, you know, it's almost, they're not just questioning your spending, they're almost questioning your life choices, your values. Some people, there are some women in relationships who keep a secret running away fund. And that's come down through generations. You know, a lot of young women, I've heard say, you know, their grandmothers of all kind of ethnicities and cultures from all over the world. Our grandmothers came and said, always have a little bit of money that no one knows about, you know? And then, you know, if you're dating, this is some of the research that I found, that they found that couples will talk about anything and go through every milestone in a relationship. So they will be intimate, they will move in together, they will meet the in-laws, but they don't talk about money. Because at what point in a dating scenario do you tell somebody if you've got huge credit card debts? Really messed up, you know?
Yeah, absolutely.
So I think it's never about money. It's about, you know,
how something else.
How people judge you and the mistakes, how you judge yourself. And I really, honestly, like Faiza, a lot of people are in denial about money. We don't even talk to ourselves about money, you know?
No, we don't. It's something that we'd rather just, you know, shove under the bed. You know, I have to say, as I was reading the book, it reminded me of this episode many years ago when I was watching the Oprah show. And there's this woman who had very much similar to Faiza. She was an American woman, and she had this very kind of this facade going on. You know, she had her nails done every week, her hair done every week. She was driving something like a big SUV and going on lunch dates and coffee dates with her friends and everything. Only, you know, to realize that she had racked up so much credit card debt and she didn't tell her husband because she was so embarrassed. And if I'm not wrong, her husband came to find out that she had actually racked up like close to 100,000 on the Oprah show. And I was just, you know, I was blown away. But this is actually something that happens very, very often. And it's that facade that we try to keep, you know, keeping up with the Joneses.
It's really interesting. So my mom is from Pakistan. And she was actually one of the first readers of the book after my agent, you know, she loved it. And when she read it, she told me about an episode in Pakistan in the 50s, where there was a woman who borrowed money from a money lender. And when he asked for the money back, again, to sort of keep up appearances, and she didn't tell her husband. And it was a really sad sort of situation, because when he threatened to tell the husband, that poor woman took her own life, and she had young children, because she was so ashamed of what she'd done, and she didn't want to bring that embarrassment onto her husband. So these things, and when I was doing my research, I found things like this. You're saying America, I found it in Brazil, in Germany, articles like this, in India. So it's such a deep-rooted thing, and this is also why I wanted to explore it, because we don't talk about it, right?
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
Yet it's widespread.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's being fueled even more now these days by social media. You really want to tell a story about yourself.
Yeah.
Yeah, that may not necessarily be true. And I think you captured it really, really well in that story. That's what I like about non fiction, is that, you can read it, and it doesn't sound preachy, but it's actually, you end up being sympathetic to the character that you're reading. And like I said in our earlier chat, it's very, very easy for us to judge Faiza. I found myself judging Faiza. How could she do this to her family? And then later on, as we were going, we saw the emotions that she was going through, came to realize that that could actually happen to anyone. It could happen to me. One innocent lie develops into something bigger and big, and before you know it, your entire life is out of control. Yeah, and you also touch upon the Me Too movement, which is also, very, very serious topic that's made headlines in the last few years. Have you noticed that was this a common theme in your clients that you were coaching?
I mean, it's quite prevalent, isn't it? I mean, I talk about that. I talk about microaggressions as well.
Yes.
I think what I wanted to show was that this one lie with Faiza has made her so desperate that it's put her in situations where she's vulnerable and in kind of dangers. And I think where she comes into this, danger point with the Me Too situation, I think in normal circumstances, her alarm bells would have rung. And she would have been aware, but because she's so desperate, she almost sort of overrides her instinct,
Yeah. Yeah.
And so unfortunately it is quite common, and it does happen. It does happen a lot. And I think, but for me, again, it wasn't necessarily that I was picking those themes. I think I was following Faiza's journey. And as she gets more and more desperate and her situation, she becomes more and more alone and isolated. And more and more desperate, and becomes more vulnerable as a consequence.
Yeah. In your writing process, first of all, how long did it take you to write this book, from like you said, first sentence to the last?
So I started writing this. I've always loved to write, but I've never written seriously. And I started this in my late 40s. So I just, you get coming up to 50 and you think, oh my gosh, it's now or never.
Yeah.
And I started it and wrote for a few months, but then I had to stop because, my life was quite overwhelming. So my children were still small. My mom was very ill. She was in and out of the hospital. I was her only carer. I was doing 3 jobs, one of which involved flying to Dubai every 4 weeks. And I was trying to write, but I just couldn't. And I thought maybe I can't do this, trying to do this later in life, right? And I tried, and it's just too much. And also, you think, you're taking time away from your family, from work, from your friends. You don't know if you'll ever get published. The odds are so small. I felt quite guilty as well. And I actually stopped for 3 years.
Oh, wow.
I just stopped but I stayed in touch with my writing group, and I stayed in touch socially, and I kept taking little online courses because there was something inside me that didn't want this whole dream to die. And then when I came back, I couldn't stop thinking about the story. I really missed writing. Things got calmer in life, but maybe not even that. I had some CBT sessions to actually manage my guilt around doing this, because when you've been, a mother, all your life and looked after extended family and just you've always done things for everybody else. And I had to come to terms with that it was okay to want something for myself at the age of 50.
Yeah, that's very profound,
Yeah,
actually.
and actually nothing that much changed because I was still, looking after, but in my mind something shifted. I allowed myself. I didn't
Yeah,
need his permission to do it.
yeah. So you
Um,
started creating, did you start carving out, chunks of time, like in the evenings or in the morning?
I did, but I also did something. I joined, I applied and was accepted for a master's in creative writing.
Mm,
And I was doing it part-time, but in a way it was good for me because it gave me some kind of structure and, accountability to produce work.
yeah,
And it's really good to write with people who understand, the writing process.
yeah,
And it also was a flag to everybody else in my life that this is really serious. This is not just a hobby. And my husband was super supportive and he was always, encouraging me. But it's hard for other people, I think, in your life to understand why you're disappearing.
yeah. Yeah, it's very easy for people to kind of dismiss it as a hobby
Oh
when
my goodness,
really,
I got it so much. Oh, just another housewife writing a novel. But all
yeah,
the time.
yeah, but really it's that little voice in your head, right, that's calling you to do it and will not let you sleep at night
No,
until you
no,
actually do
3 years.
it.
Yeah, 3 years. I couldn't stop thinking about it. Yeah.
Well, I'm so glad that that little voice did not let you, you know, get off the hook that easily because thanks to that, we have this amazing book out in the world that's so entertaining and so insightful. And yeah, definitely, really, really glad you kept at it. So I know you said that you left it for about 3 years. You didn't write anything.
Yeah.
So how long in total do you think you ended up, like all in all,
It
taking?
took me about, I think, 2 years, 2.5 years when I came
Okay,
back with the
okay,
editing and everything.
okay.
So it took me two
So
and a half years. And I loved it. I just loved it. I would disappear into this world. My time writing was the time I felt most exhilarated,
mm,
frustrated as well, of course, when it's not going exactly how you want.
yeah,
But and then I edited because the editing took me a good, I don't know, 8 months, 9 months. So
yep,
within that 2.5 years, 8, 9 months was just editing.
yeah, yeah. Editing does take a long time,
Takes a
doesn't it?
long time, yeah, which you don't
Yeah,
know at the debut, but I think it's really now really reassuring as I'm writing book 2 because, and I tell everybody that if your first draft is not perfect, it doesn't matter because you will do several drafts.
yeah,
It always gets refined.
yeah. Exactly. It's progress, not perfection, isn't it? Yeah. I, I'm I'm glad you talked about this because there's this push these days for writing because I'm so keen on books and authors, um, but also that spills out to other areas of the life of your life where we're almost trained to kind of like perceive the creative process as something that happens like that,
Oh yeah.
like, well, why haven't you started writing your book? Why, you started 3 months ago, why isn't it done?
Yeah.
And during lockdown, I don't know about you, but when I went on social media, there was really this push of you have to do it, you have to produce a masterpiece by the time we come out of lockdown. You have to, and I felt like it was so much pressure. Like, what do
As
you
if,
think
as
about
if
creativity?
coping with a global pandemic is not enough use of your energy,
Yeah, yeah. Are you of the opinion that, I mean, I don't know how you work creatively. Do you work better when you're under pressure or when you have this expansiveness of time and just, you know,
I think it's a little bit of both, to be
mm,
honest, strangely enough. Because when you have too much pressure, my kind of creative muscle does not work so well. I think you need to, as I'm writing book 2, I need to be free in my mind.
mm-hmm,
So mentally, I think I work better without pressure. Uh,
mm,
but I do like deadlines.
yeah,
So I think probably it's a funny kind of combination. So I
mm-hmm,
like the deadlines, but I don't pressurize myself anymore in terms of, I need to write X amount of words today, or I have a general idea, I need to finish it in 3 weeks or 4 weeks, get here. But I'm not putting pressure on a daily basis, if you see what I mean. So
Yeah, yeah.
overall pressure is good, but on a minute level, micro level, I don't find it helpful.
And are you doing anything different now on your second book that you probably didn't do in your first book? Have you
Yes.
adopted new practices? Have you dropped old practices?
Yes, so I overwrote massively. My book was way too long when I
Mm,
wrote the first one, and then I had to cut a lot, working with my agent, working with my editor. And I am quite conscious of sort of constructing it, because I was writing as a debut, as without really thinking about publication, to be honest, as such. I was writing
mm,
my story. Now I'm more aware of the sort of the structure, the kind of length a book is expected to be, just for this genre in particular. And so I'm conscious of the length and sort of constructing it quite more consciously rather than just
mm.
writing it.
Yes, yes. Yeah, you're writing it more like it's almost like with a not with a critical eye, but yeah, something close to that,
An awareness that I
Yeah,
didn't
yeah,
have
an
before.
awareness.
Exactly. Yes.
Yeah. And is the second book, this other book that you're writing now, is it similar to Why Would I Lie to You? Is it vastly different?
I am absolutely fascinated with people, as you can see,
Mm-hmm.
So people, what makes us tick, our motivations, relationships. But my favorite kind of book is a page turner.
Mm.
And I do like to be entertained. So with this book, I think, we've got both those elements. And with the second book as well, that's the kind of book I want to write, you know?
Mm. Yeah.
Focused on relationships, focused on character driven, and yet having a really, complex plot that keeps people reading and page
Yeah.
turning.
Yeah.
So I think with this book, I really want people to be entertained. And
Mm-hmm.
the feedback I've had is, again and again, I was up till 2 a.m. I couldn't put it down. I laughed because the funny bit, it's not a funny book as such, but Faiza's worldview and her kind of wry kind of voice perhaps makes it
Yeah. Yeah.
entertaining. Um, and yet, as you say, a lot of people say after I shut the book and I'd been on this journey, I thought about all the things that perhaps came up.
Mm.
And the whole, the judgment thing, I really wanted to explore that because, again, even with the women who are having the Botox,
Mm-hmm.
ostensibly very superficial, focused on their clothes, potentially you could say spoiled. But I really have a lot of sympathy for these women as well
Mm-hmm.
because why are they doing this? These
Mm-hmm.
are women in their 40s. It's not easy to always be looking perfect,
Mm.
spending all your time and energy on this. But
Mm-hmm.
the fact is that society does not value motherhood. We do
No.
not. Okay, so their kind of agency, they don't have any agency. They've given up work. They're almost at the mercy. They're aware that their husbands and their friends are going off with trophy wives. And to
Mm-hmm.
be honest, their appearance is what they're judged on.
Mm-hmm.
And and so on the one hand, although our quick thing would be, look at these spoiled women wasting all this money, I'm always interested in the motivation.
Yeah.
Why would
But
you do this to yourself? Really? I mean, why would you make this your life's work? Who really wants to do that every day and go, that's such hard work.
yeah, it's a full-time job,
It is.
maintaining this appearance, and I it never ceases to fascinate me that you have the body of a 16-year-old, but really you're like, you know, late 50s, early 60s, and I just cannot reconcile those
No.
two things.
And it interested me that why is this happening? And actually, if you read the classics, when I looked around at, the Yummy Mummies and this group of women, if I thought about, if I read Jane Austen, if I read Pride and Prejudice, and I saw women in London in 2021, highly educated women, intelligent women, their identity was so tied to their husbands' jobs,
Mm,
the house that they lived in because of their husband's job, their
mm-hmm,
status in a particular social group because of their husband's job.
mm-hmm,
And it really angered me because, we're not valuing the time they're spending with their children. We're not valuing them for who they are. And as a
yeah,
society, I started to think when, like you were saying about the Instagram and everything and social media, when did it all become about, what we have and how we look rather than who we are?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. As you were talking and you were mentioning husbands, my husband brought me a cup of tea. So it's chai. So welcome
Good.
to a cup of tea with me.
Always welcome. Yes.
It's always time for chai, right?
Always, always.
Yeah. Anyway, I've got two last questions. I don't want to hold up all the time. We could go on for ages. But number one, who inspires you? Like, which author inspires you, or what book has inspired you the most? And number two, maybe you can put your coaching hat on and tell us, like, for anyone out there who's has dreams of writing their own novel, what advice would you give them? And yeah, so that they can,
Sure.
kind of like release that voice into the world, so to speak.
I mean, so, I will go with that one first because this is why I talk quite honestly about how hard it was for me to write and the struggle, and how you have self-doubt as well. Because
Mm.
when I was writing, if you look at all the numbers of getting published, so my agent, who I really wanted, who's my agent now, she gets over 5,000 submissions a year and she signs 10 authors.
Oh my God.
Now, if it's so overwhelming that you would just freeze, right? Just thinking
Yeah.
about it. And then, of course, your novel going on to submission, publisher buying it, and all of that. So my advice is always, we write because we have something to say and we have a story to tell. And this is why I couldn't let go of this dream for 3 years. In a way, that dream has to come first because
Hmm.
everything else after that is not in your control. And so all you can do is write your novel, put all that stuff out of your mind, and find some kind of structure in your life. So somebody was telling me, if you write 1,000 words a day, or if you even write 500 a day in three months, you'll have a first draft, right? So
Yes.
break it into smaller chunks so you
Hmm.
don't feel overwhelmed. Oh my gosh, how do I write, an
Yeah.
80,000 word book?
Hmm.
And then
Hmm.
the biggest thing that helped me, honestly, the biggest thing was having a great group of writer friends. So I started off doing a novel writing course at Curtis Brown Creative. And those people are still my friends. And
Mm.
we still share our work and get feedback from each other. And in those 3 years that I wasn't writing, they stayed in touch with me. They kept encouraging me. So it's really important because writing is a really strange kind of occupation, and a lot of people in your life may not understand it.
Yeah. Yeah,
So those are
absolutely.
my, two pieces of advice. Just write it without thinking about what will happen next. That will come later. Finish your book. Believe that it's okay. It's a dream. You're allowed to have dreams in your life. This is your life.
Hmm.
And
Yeah.
have a good supportive group of writer friends who
Yeah.
understand the anguish of it that nobody else understands. Because of course, you start writing a book and everybody in your family will say, will it be finished? Have you sold it yet? And when have you sold it to Hollywood yet? Because this is
Yeah.
what people will say. Because only your writer friends will understand, the writing, the editing, the
Yeah.
obstacles.
Yeah. I think it's always about the process itself and not the end product.
Well, always.
Yeah. I read a story about Stephen King. Carrie, I think, was his first novel, and he actually thought it was so rubbish. They were living in a trailer park, and he just chucked it in the bin, and he was just like, I'm never going to be a writer. And only because his wife had enough belief in the story that she, plucked it out of the bin. And I don't know if she submitted it or he did, but then because of that, because he had someone who really believed in him, he is the writing god that we know
Exactly.
today.
And it's that whole thing, like you said, it's the process. And I would say that to anybody coaching. And the great thing about my husband's encouragement was that he said these words to me when I used to get really stressed. He said, you're writing it for yourself. You're doing it because you enjoy it. That's it. There's
Yeah.
no pressure. When will it
Yeah.
get published? Or,
Yeah. Enjoy the ride. Enjoy the
enjoy the
ride.
ride. And think of Stephen King. Think of Stephen King.
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly. And I don't think answered it, but maybe you did while you're talking. But like, which writer inspires you, or what book has been most
Yes.
pivotal in your own writing journey?
So for this book, I mean, so many writers, it's really hard to pin it down. But I love psychological thrillers, and
Mm-hmm.
I also love sort of family domestic dramas. And you can see this is kind of a melding of both those genres. But
Yeah.
interestingly enough, this book was really inspired by a story by a Russian writer called Gogol,
Mm-hmm.
and a short story that was written, I think, in the 1800s. And I've never forgotten that story. I love his short stories, and it was called The Overcoat. And it
Mm-hmm.
was about this poor clerk who has to buy a new overcoat, which is so expensive because it's very cold in St. Petersburg. His old one is beyond repair. And, he saves up and, he can't eat and he just waits and waits. And the interesting thing was that, and he was somebody who was not respected he was in an office, nobody really spoke to him. Then he got this coat, and it was really interesting how everybody reacted to him.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody's attitude changed towards him. He suddenly had
Mm-hmm.
their attention. He suddenly had their respect. People were inviting him out.
Mm-hmm.
And this, I think, is some of the core thing that really inspired the story. And it's so interesting how that was written in Russia in the 1800s.
Yeah.
I'm writing about now. But that was the key theme, isn't it? How people perceive us, whether it's to do with Faiza's identity as a British Asian woman, and the clothes she wears for that, or the way she
Mm-hmm.
looks, or whether it's to do with, the designer labels that the Yummy Mummies carry,
Yeah.
or the
Yeah.
city workers with their labels and their certain things that they wear and they own. How other people perceive us on these external things.
Yeah, absolutely. The Gogol book that you mentioned, I know he wrote a play called The Government Inspector, which is very similar. But those are two different works, right?
Yes, these are the short stories. Yeah.
Okay. So I guess it's something that's was very prevalent in St. Petersburg, and it still continues to this day. So
Sadly, yes, it's human nature, isn't it? Human nature is
yeah,
human nature.
yeah, absolutely. Um, when do you expect to release your second book? Do you have a date yet, or?
Yes, so this book is coming out. It's out now in hardback and audio and ebook. Would I
Mhm.
like to? It's coming out, I think, in January in paperback.
Mm.
And it's coming out in America in February. And then the second book, I think, is out in November 2022.
Oh wow! So we don't
Yes.
have much, that long of a wait.
No, no.
Yeah,
So it's exciting, yes. And there's the
yeah,
deadline. So I need to be finishing it.
yeah. It's very, very exciting, and all the best to you. I
So much.
cannot wait. I think we'll
Thank you.
get copies of this book in the library very soon. But
Oh, I'm
yeah,
a library. I mean, I spent my childhood in libraries, so I cannot tell you how happy I am to think of my book in libraries. I honestly, it was my second home growing up, so
yeah,
that thrills me beyond anything.
yeah, yeah. You and me both, right?
Exactly, all of
Yeah,
us book lovers. Exactly.
yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Well, I don't know if anyone out there who's listening to the interview, if they have any questions. No, Laura just sent a message, a comment saying it's a lovely interview. Thank you, Laura, and thank you so much for joining us today. Should we give them a few more seconds? If there's any comments, I'm just going to check my Facebook. Yeah, yeah, a lot of likes, a lot of heart
Oh,
shapes.
thank you.
So
Thank you
yeah,
so much.
yeah, you're very, very welcome, and thank you for joining us. We will leave this. I mean, the day is sunny outside. I imagine a lot of people are going to be out and really enjoying the weather. But we will. Oh, there's someone who's just come on asking a question. What have been your favorite reads over lockdown? That's a question from Tom Ryan.
Oh my gosh. So many things. It's really hard to remember. I did read something that I really loved recently, which is called The Girls Are Also Nice Here by Laurie Elizabeth Flynn. But to be honest, I have been editing non-stop over
Mm,
lockdown. And because we had quite a fast turnaround from my book deal. to delivering and editing. So I have such a huge to be read pile. In fact, lying in front of me. So I have The Hunting Wives, Hostage Book, Adele Parks. I have The Khan by Saima Mir. I have so many books that I'm, waiting to read.
Yeah, gosh, that sounds like quite a pile. But
Really
one thing,
exciting, but yeah.
yeah, it is very exciting. I don't know if anyone else has any other question before we wrap up. I realize that we do have time constraints. Otherwise, we can go on forever with this. Yeah, I'm not getting any other questions. Like I said, we will share this on our Hillingdon Facebook page so that people can come back to it and listen to it and watch it when they have time. Fiona says, I've enjoyed this interview. Thank you. Thank you so much, Fiona, for joining us today. And yeah, thank you everyone out there who's joined us today during your lunchtime hour and for this very insightful, very fun conversation. I'm really, really grateful that you took the time to be with us today, Aliya.
Pleasure. Thank you so much.
Yeah, you're very welcome. And we can't wait to see your other book once it comes out. We'd love to have you back.
Thank you. I would love that too.
Yeah. All right. Well, enjoy your day and take care, everyone.